Is that all it takes?
Just a little bit of powder. Look at me. I'm there. Fantastic. My name is Kieran Holmes-Darby. I'm the Managing Director and co-founder at Excel Esports, one of the UK's leading esports teams. So I've always been a gamer. I've casually gamed my whole life. It's the way my brother and I bonded as we grew up. I've done it as a hobby, I suppose, ever since I can remember. The thing that got me kind of hooked on gaming, if you like, was World of Warcraft back in the day, and then moving on into Xbox games such as Halo, Gears of War, Call of Duty, and most recently League of Legends. So my first competitive game was Call of Duty. I actually played that on the Game Battles website as it was previously. Used to play with friends, thought I was good, but was absolutely awful. But used to love competing. Anything that was like competitive in any way, I wanted to kind of be a part of. And Call of Duty was the first game that really got me into that. So after my sort of console endeavors, I expanded my horizons from Call of Duty into Halo and Gears of War first. So when I realised I wasn't good enough at Call of Duty, I thought maybe it's just the game. Maybe it's Halo or Gears of War is better. That also didn't work out, so then ended up getting into PC gaming. I would go back and forth with World of Warcraft, did a bit of the PvP and esports element there, but then kind of landed on League of Legends. And League of Legends is the PC game that I now play and is the one that has kind of got me. Yeah, of course. So some people know this story, some don't. But Excel was founded in a great British pub, a Wetherspoons to be precise. This was in November of 2014. And even back then, I'd put a bit of, I'd probably put a year's thought into esports before this actually happened. But so I was up at Lancaster University. My brother came up to visit me. We were just discussing gaming, and it was a passion of ours anyway. And then I sort of said, hey, I've kind of had this idea, and I said, we could do an esports team. I even had an idea of the brand and the name of Excel and what the logo might look like. It looked awful, the logo that I designed, but I had these ideas, but never really thought about actually going for it because I just started a degree and my brother was doing his graduate course at KPMG, so it was very much, we didn't really have that much time, or at least we didn't think we did at the time. I'm more the bull in the china shop, and he's more the reserved and calculated one, but it was actually him who said, let's just do it. Like, let's just go home, let's have a look online and see if we can just create a team and do it as a bit of a hobby. And I suppose that was how it was born, out of just passion and a passion project or a hobby to start with. I think the tagline back in the day was to recreate the optic gaming of esports, but for the UK. That was an organisation that we looked up to as one that created fantastic content and really sort of was taking that industry by storm. So we used them as a bit of an example in our pitch process and said, hey, look where these guys are, this is where we want to get to, help us on this journey, I suppose. Yeah, so I suppose in the UK back at that time, esports wasn't particularly mainstream or wasn't widely very well known. I was big into esports and gaming, but didn't really know about my esports society at university or anything like that. We created Excel, and back in those days, it was very much low startup costs. If you wanted to start an organisation, you didn't really need money, you just needed thought and you needed a social media presence. And then when it got to actually coming to events times, it was like, okay, actually we might need some funding here. Can we get a little bit of sponsorship or whatever? But we didn't really need massive startup costs. That being said, we grew quicker than we expected and we started a need for some form of investment. Me being a student, I had no money. My brother did have a job, so he had some money put aside which he could put to it. But I actually turned to my university and turned to Lancaster through their sort of entrepreneur grant scheme. I had to go through a pitch process where I showed them what I thought my business plan looks like at that point and pitch for a grant for them to help me get this off the ground. A very small amount, but enough to at least fund a couple of teams to a couple of events and get our name out there, start the ball rolling, I suppose. Yeah, massively. I mean, I actually found out about the whole entrepreneur grant scheme through my friends who were doing the entrepreneurship degree. I wasn't doing anything, I was doing law, so I was very much nothing to do with entrepreneurship, nothing to do with esports or gaming or anything. This was my kind of side project, but I found out about this grant that they do. It's not just for the entrepreneurship degree, it's for any uni student who is feeling relatively entrepreneurial at the time and wants to do something, and they want to support those people, because there's been a few success stories coming out of Lancaster University creating great companies, and they're the ones that the uni obviously shouts about more than what people necessarily have done through their degrees. So that's a big scheme there, and I found out about it and went and pitched. And I've always enjoyed public speaking, which is a weird thing to say, and not a lot of people do enjoy it. So I feel a little bit, I suppose, privileged in that I feel comfortable doing that pitch process. But doing the actual prep for the pitch, the original business plan was very much a theoretical approach. It was not bogged down in numbers at all. It was a vision. I didn't know what a business plan was. I'd never done something like that before. So actually, to even start putting the thought in at such an early point in Excel's existence on a business plan and where it possibly could go in the future was really helpful and really beneficial, I think. So yeah, I think the university space for esports is massively important. I think it's something that has been underdeveloped in the past, and as I said, when I was at university, it wasn't really a thing. It wasn't something that I could get involved with. Knowing what I know now, I obviously would be getting involved, and if there was the infrastructure that is in place now, it would have been much easier for me to get involved. I think for us, it's going to be where grassroots esports is, and it's going to be where people start their careers, whether that be players, coaching staff, or anything to do with esports, because if it's media or content or financial controllers, you could be doing an accounting and finance degree and end up in esports because that's your passion. So I think at the universities is the only place that it makes sense for people to start honing their skills in esports wherever it may be. So it's going to be massively important for future talent right across the board, I think. So I think if I give one piece of advice, it's, your degree does not have to necessarily be esports focused, or, you don't even necessarily have to do esports modules specifically in order to get into esports. I think if you're looking to get into esports, my biggest bit of advice is be exposed to the industry, get to events, network with people in the industry and start to understand it more. But don't necessarily think you have to tailor your education to it, because it could be that doing a standard marketing degree is actually much more beneficial than doing something that is completely esports focused. If you have the opportunity to do something that touches on esports, great, definitely go for it. But I don't think you need to worry too much about your education being esports focused, but just get exposure to the industry, start talking to people and just be present. So when I was at Lancaster University, I competed in the Roses VARSITY competition. I played rugby at the time. That VARSITY is huge. I think it's the biggest VARSITY in Europe or something on those lines, because it plays all of the different sports, but all of the teams play as well. So it's not just the first teams play. So it's a huge event. I used to prefer the away Roses actually, as opposed to the home Roses, because you used to get on a bus, you used to go over to York and you used to be sort of an alien on their turf, and everyone would sort of holler at you, and it was brilliant. So yeah, I used to love VARSITY. I used to love going to the Roses competition, whether it be at Lancaster or York. I played rugby in Roses throughout my university time. Didn't know that esports was a thing until my final year. Ended up going and watching it, and then came back the year after to sponsor the event and got Excel's Twitter channel to start posting about luges. So that was in 2018, I think I did that. Yeah, the development of grassroots esports in general is massively important, and linked to that heavily is VARSITY competitions in universities. I mean, it makes sense. It's a competition. That's where esports should definitely be thriving. So I definitely think esports at VARSITY is needed, and it was going on when I was at university, but in a much smaller way than it is now, and it's great to see. Shout out to the Lancaster University Gaming and Esports Society. Up the luges, hashtag roses are red. I smash these questions out like they're breakfast, mate.